If you have an expert content producer who's a writer, who knows how to craft the messages, who knows what messages to craft, well, you lean into generative AI and you can get the output. I'm seeing it and I'm doing it right now in multiple contexts where I have part time writers who are working 20 hours a week and are producing 3 to 4x the content at double the quality of what highly paid, very expensive writers are producing in traditional marketing orgs.
Hello, viewers and listeners, and welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. Have Mark Donnigan from Growth Stage Marketing here with us today. Mark serves as a virtual CMO and business consultant, sales leadership background with over $500 million in revenue, has a revenue first approach to marketing and overall growth structures. Going to be looking forward to talking about go-to-market strategy today and beyond. Mark, thanks for taking the time to join the pod.
Yeah, well, Jason, it's awesome to be here. Love the show and the topic. Let's jump in.
Let's do it. Let's
Yeah,
do it. So I know you have a sales leadership background. Where did it all
that's
begin
right.
for you? What is
Yeah,
the classic podcast question? What is
that's right.
your
That's right.
story?
What's your story? Yeah, how did you get to where you are today?
Where did it
Yeah.
all begin?
Yeah, I always preface it by saying, everything was absolutely scripted. It was planned. I executed it with
Of
flawless precision. No, that's a joke because I think
course.
most of us can relate to, you look back at your career and, how things unfolded. And it's like, wow, if I hadn't have, taken that job and met that person and, and worked with this company, like, where would I be, So,
Of course.
yeah, so I'll keep it short. Really, I am a revenue first marketer, which means that my journey began in sales, and my journey began at 12 years old when I discovered my school's Apple II, and I started teaching myself BASIC, and so I guess it also dates myself, but I loved it. I thought, wow, this is amazing. I can make computers, do what I want them to, So had a great time, went into a computer science program, dropped out the end of my sophomore year and went to music school because, well, I got kind of this left brain, right brain thing going on. And at the time I thought, I'd rather be a rock star, than sitting in an office somewhere, pounding code. A long story short, I realized that, yeah, being a rock star, very, 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 very few people actually make a living doing that. The common thread was through high school and college mostly, I was working selling Apple computers, selling electronics. I was selling. And I really leaned into it. I was not kind of, one of those geeky guys that just wanted to, kind of work around cool stuff. Like, I also like the idea, like, wait a second, if I can get someone to spend $1,500 instead of 1,000, let's see, what's my commission? Ooh, I like that. So I guess that's kind of, going back to, 17, 18 years old. That's kind of where my, you'd almost say maybe my business mind, started to emerge. Started reading the books of Zig Ziglar. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know how many 19 or 20-year-olds, were studying Zig Ziglar, but in between customers, I always had a Ziegler book open and I was reading it and just really devouring it, So that's where my journey began. And, I eventually went on to lead, bigger sales teams, become a sales leader, you might say today, almost a CRO. Didn't really have the title back then. And I was working in more smaller, medium-sized organizations, but that then connected me to marketing and then I started getting involved in building startups, and that connected me to more business development, which then connected me into corporate strategy. So, all of a sudden it's like, yes, we're looking at revenue for the quarter and for the year, but we're really looking at, how do we build this business? How do we build the enterprise value? And all that just begin to converge and come together. And so today, I do position myself largely, mostly as a virtual CMO. But it turns out that most of the time I'm working in the area of go to market, and go to market is where marketing intersects with, with sales, with revenue, intersects with strategy. Very often, product is a component since I work with technology companies almost exclusively. And that's where I am. So that's my journey.
I love it. I love it. So the Apple IIs, teaching yourself
That's
basic,
right.
12 years old,
Yeah.
computer science, into music, saw, hey, I need to figure out something else to
Yeah.
pay the
I,
bills
I
here.
actually
There's
want to make a living.
only so many rock stars out there. I'm sure you're
Yeah.
very talented, though. Got into Apple computer sales, started large managing larger sales teams,
Yeah.
getting into more corporate sales structures, CRO type roles, and
Yeah.
finding go to market was really the need. People may have said,
Yeah.
"Hey, we need marketing. Come on board as an interim CMO, fractional CMO." But
Right.
really, how do we incorporate sales, revenue, the
Yeah.
overall growth of the organization into the
Yeah.
picture?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we'll probably talk about this in the course of the interview. But um, if you were to look, the books I get asked all the time, so it looks like a pretty awesome bookcase you got behind you. How many of those have you read? And the quick answer is I've actually read most of them, not all of them, of course. So I had to put that out there, but I've read most. What might surprise a lot of folks, though, is if you actually were to pull books off the bookshelf, you would probably think it'd be full of marketing books, and there are. There's all the classics there, and I have read those, but they're mostly sales books. They're mostly strategy books. They're mostly business books. And one of my observations is whenever I meet especially a marketing leader, so CMO, VP of marketing, or I talk to a CEO, and they express some concern, about how their marketing leader is doing. In almost every case, I don't want to say 100%, but a very, very high percentage of the time, when I meet the individual and I learn, what they're doing, what their strategies are, I find that they actually are executing the marketing playbook anywhere from well to great. They're doing a good job, but they're failing the enterprise because they don't understand business. And at the end of the day, a founder, a CEO, like, look, yes, they care about the website. Yes, they want their brand to be, recognized. And yes, they care about that. But what is marketing's job? Primary job. It's drive revenue, right?
Yep.
And too
Yep.
many marketers are out doing a good job of marketing and yet failing their business.
Yeah, I like to look at marketing as sales on a mass level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you said, there's this evolving role of the CMO
Yeah.
where
That's right.
it's not the misconceptions, it's not the, stereotypical, hey, marketing is graphic design and how does this look in a
Arts and
broadcast
crafts
television
department,
commercial? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's less of the branding side, more
Yeah.
of digital direct response, or given the
Yeah.
vertical could be various channels, but more of a business strategist
Yeah.
and ecosystem domain expert.
Yeah.
Have you seen this change up? Have you seen the progression of that CMO role in the past 10, in the past 20 years,
Mhm.
getting into the digital era, talking about AI, talking about, you were mentioning to me before our discussion here, doing more with less. How
Yeah.
have you seen
Yeah.
things escalate over the past
Yeah.
decade or so?
Yeah. So, Jason, things have really changed in terms of how buyers buy, and I'll rephrase that. It's how buyers get information. And so, for the listeners who might be a little bit newer in their careers and maybe have been, marketing and selling, let's say in the last 10 years or less, there. they may not understand that there was a time when if you were a buyer, you had to go to a trade show. You had to reach out to a vendor that you were interested in learning about their solution, their product. And, I don't want to say beg, but, back in the day, there was a time when you wanted to learn about the latest, Cisco router, the latest Dell server. You had to have a connection. And guess what? You were networking inside your company going, hey, does anybody know, the Dell rep? We're having a hard time getting a meeting, hey, do we have a meeting scheduled at Computex, to meet with this vendor? Hey, do we like you had the vendor held the keys, you know?
Yes.
And now I'm not suggesting that, vendors could sort of, sit up high on the mountain and look down and say, I will sell to you and I will not sell to you. There's still competition, and there were always, there's always somebody out there who is trying to steal that business. But the point is that even with websites and even with information being much more readily available, 15 years ago, certainly 20 years ago online, vendors still held a lot of sway in the market. Well, let's fast forward to like 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. And all of a sudden, social networks began to form. There's a lot of groups, right? That just started getting formed. So accountants, started creating Facebook groups. Marketing professionals created LinkedIn groups. IT professionals created Facebook groups and Discord channels and go on and on, right? And so what happened there? So what began to happen was that now peers could come together, and now Mark and Jason, who perform similar functions or identical functions but in two different companies, could interact, and Mark could ask Jason, hey, Jason, by the way, I seem to remember you posted something a couple months ago about you guys did an implementation. I've been meaning to ask you, how did that go? And Jason begins to give Mark the full lowdown of the pros and the cons and how the vendor performed and what they thought of the solution and where they had hiccups and where they were pleasantly surprised. And now Mark is taking all that information in and going, wow, that's super interesting because this is an initiative for Q2, certainly Q3. I'm starting to plan. I'm thinking about calling that vendor. Wow, thank you for the information. And now what just happened? The vendor and the vendors, were completely bypassed. It's now two professionals where there's a whole different level of trust and credibility. Now, Mark is listening to Jason, not with this kind of 50% like suspicious, like, okay, I hear you, but how much this is a sales pitch?
Yeah.
How
The
much is
trust is
real?
there. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so this has completely reshaped not only the way that marketing works, the way that marketing needs to be executed, it's reshaped how sales works. It has absolutely flipped the B2B selling process, the B2B marketing process on its head. And amazingly, not everybody has gotten the message. And so those who are still executing kind of the comms playbook, the PR playbook, the branding playbook, yes, there's elements that are still needed, right? And
Yes.
that's why not everybody's gotten the message, because there's a bit of a hangover effect where it's like, oh, but our brand, look at our share of voice. Share of voice doesn't matter when the primary communications channel is Mark and Jason, two professionals exchanging information.
Right.
You
Right.
know, all of a sudden, share of voice is completely irrelevant because guess what? Jason could tell Mark about some some software company, some solution, some technology that is completely unknown, but because Mark respects, Jason in this example, then guess what goes on the short list? And this is why Gartner started reporting all the way back. I first saw the data come out, I think it was around 2018, 2019, but the trend is only accelerating. That even back in, like I say, around 2018, 19, that nearly 50% of the buyer's journey or the buying process was being completed before the first vendor was contacted. That is so remarkable and
Good
profound
metric
if you
right
think
there.
about that.
Yeah. I was in mobile advertising sales, product marketing for mobile advertising network. This is back 2010, 2013,
Yeah.
seeing RFPs, requests for proposals around SOV, share of voice, and it felt
Yeah.
like an outdated metric at that point.
Even
And
at
then,
that point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then speaking to group directors at agencies, speaking to associate media directors, big four holding company type
Yeah.
agencies representing the largest, Fortune 500s, if you
Yeah.
will, and asking, hey, how do you put together a media plan, a media strategy? And we were at
Yeah.
an event and they pointed to their vendors. They're like, well, I'm friends with this guy. They have a good offering. Going to work, do something with them. Friends with that person. They're
Yeah.
actually doing something new. It's pretty cool. We're going to put that in the plan. We have some historical vendors. Like you said, so much of the buying process was done even before starting to
That's right.
talk to new ad networks, new platforms. And I think it's because of what you mentioned. It's that trust. Are they
Yeah.
selling me a bill of goods?
Yeah.
Did it just have a
Yeah.
good pitch?
Yeah.
Or am I going to be able to talk to this person and manage the campaign to a point of
That's right.
effectiveness? Are they
That's right.
only doing what they're doing because of their character, their marketing
Yeah.
expertise, and that's why they're focusing on it? There's so much behind it, and I
Yeah.
like the person to person element that you're
Yeah.
mentioning here. Peer to peer obviously is huge in business to consumer, and being
That's
able to
right.
have customers talking about how much they love a brand online. Boy, is that gold for marketing, but happening in the B2B arena as well, like you're mentioning, and going all off word of mouth, going
That's
off
right.
of, referral partners, affiliates,
Yeah.
or even just fans who have used not just the product, but the content in their own day to day
Yeah.
conversations. So,
Yeah.
what does it look like to live in that world? And let me ask you this. What does a go to marketing strategy look like to
Yeah.
stimulate that? Is it going after some
That's
of
right.
the in groups that you mentioned? Is it doing a
Yeah.
lot of events? Is it being part of a, and I understand the contrast of what you're saying for events there 10 years ago versus now. Is it being
Yeah.
part of more of these digital ecosystems? How do you even go about putting pen to paper on a
Yeah.
go-to-market strategy in that world?
Yeah, yeah, an amazing question, and I preface this way. So the dollars are still going to be spent. They're going to be allocated and spent differently. Now that so let's talk about events because I think that's one that's
Okay.
especially depending on the sector, the industry, some businesses are a little bit under pressure right now. SaaS companies, I mean, there's pockets, if you're doing anything, that's in core AI, well, you can raise money with not even a PowerPoint deck, right? So,
See
um,
it.
yeah, exactly. But there's plenty of other, really amazing products and solutions that are struggling, that are really struggling right now. And I think, first of all, you have to understand who the buyer is and how your product connects to the real need, to the real problem. So the world is so noisy, and the world meaning just the marketing world. There are so many messages out there. LinkedIn is just flooded with it. Every channel is flooded, right? And so people have almost just turned off. Forget trying to say, "Hey, we're better, we're faster, we're cheaper." That does not work. you know, and certainly what it does is it just pulls you into a commodity race, so if you're going to race with everybody else saying, oh, but we're just a little bit better, then the response from buyers will be, yeah, but how much cheaper are you? Oh, you
Right.
want us to be better and cheaper too? Yeah, and we want you to be faster. Oh, you can't be all three things? Okay, we're not interested, And vendors that get pulled into that, well, they're going to really struggle. They're going to really struggle. So you have to set yourself apart. The way you set yourself apart is by really getting under the hood of what is the problem that our, solution, our product, our technology is uniquely equipped to solve. And that's where it starts. And I am, again, just amazed at how many, even entrepreneurs, founders, you ask that question, and the answer that you get back is a string of, oh, but, this is what we can do and the competition can't do. This is how much faster we are. This is the one feature that we're hearing from the market everybody needs, and we have it, and nobody else does. The problem is that yes, you're hearing that, hey, if you can build this feature, we'll buy it. That is not actually truth in reality. I'm not suggesting buyers lie, but they are, we're not asking enough questions to really get into, okay, so I build that. Now, why would you switch from your platform, your solution that is working just fine today? Well, we probably want it. Oh, so you mean there's something more than just that feature, you know? But we often, get happy ears. And so we hear, a buyer tell us, if you build this, I'll buy it. And that's just not reality. So the first place that you have to start is to really get into understanding what the problem is. Then you need to understand, where do your buyers hang out? And I literally mean that, there's a digital sense, for some of us, there might be a physical sense as well. Like, where do they hang out? What trade shows they go to, what conferences, are there, is there some, are there networking events? Are there, is there somewhere? So you have to put this in context of, your industry, your business. But let's keep it digital.
Gotcha.
So again, this gets back to, are there forums? You know, are there industry associations? Are there LinkedIn groups that are really active where there's dialogue, where we can jump in and we can not sell our product? No, no, no. Just like at a networking event, you always know when someone's a newbie at a networking event, right? Because they walk up and, it's, hi, I'm Mark. And next thing you know, Mark is telling you all about what they can do. You're kind of like, wait, hang on. You seem like a nice guy. How about we enjoy this glass of wine, and, you tell me where you're from. Let's start there,
Sure. Sure.
Um, so so you have to know where they hang out. And then once you understand what their problem is, you can articulate how your solution can meet, those challenges, that problem, and where your buyers hang out. Now you begin to put together a plan, a roadmap for, how am I going to seed the market with messages in a way that the buyer's going to receive, that they don't have to, hold up a decoder ring to try and figure out what the heck we're saying, which again, the marketing teams are really guilty of doing that too, putting all this sophisticated language out there, I mean, yeah, it's kind of cool to read. Nobody knows what it means, you know. Um, so then you go out there and now you look at, okay, events. Does it really make sense to spend $300,000 on a physical trade show presence? Or should we scale down our booth, spend 150,000 on the booth, take the other 150,000, and the day before that big trade show, hold a half day user conference? Oh, that's interesting. Why
Hmm.
would you do that? Well, you would do that because the way marketing works today is by essentially building communities. And I don't mean communities as in like Facebook community groups, or LinkedIn communities. Although, yeah, you probably would stand up a LinkedIn, community page, and maybe you have a circle page or a face, in other words, but those are just mechanisms, right? In other words, the tool, the platform, that's just a mechanism. The point is that the brands and the companies, they're really thriving today. They all without exception, have a community around them. Some you can literally point to a community. There's a conference, right? I mean, HubSpot's an easy one, and marketing companies are always easy, Martech. But there's a conference, there's a huge annual Salesforce, they had Dreamforce, right, for years. And so those are communities. But you can look at other even technology companies and you say, well, they don't have a conference, but they have a podcast, and there's a very strong, it might be a small, but there's a strong group of people, set of people, a cohort, if you will, that is always dialoguing. You can see the hashtag, on LinkedIn. You can see it on X. You can pick it up. And again, it doesn't have to be large. It can be a small cohort. But if those are your engaged, super fans, or your engaged, your most engaged users, now you're able to talk to them, and they're 100% receptive, right? Because they're a super fan. They already believe in you. They already have bought into into your vision, your view of the world, your point of view. And so as we look at what strategies to implement in this whole new world, again, it's not that we're taking that $300,000 events budget, or the spend on that big annual trade show, that major trade show, and we're cutting it in half. What we're doing is we're cutting the physical part in half, because we're saying, you know what? Less and less is it important that we have the big statement booth.
Right.
Yes, we need to be there. Yes, we need a place that we can conduct meetings. Yes, it's an excellent, forum to be able to, to meet with our customers, demonstrate our products. Yes, it sends signals into the market that we're still here, that we haven't gone away. So those things are still true, but there's probably a more viable way that then we can extend into, and that would be something like a user conference. And there's
Yep.
all kinds of other variations, you know.
I love it. I mean, you're basically saying you really need to understand your unique product offering, what makes
Yeah,
you different. Don't just be
yeah.
playing the commodity game. Don't come at it just from a place of
No.
price. Long term, you will lose because
Oh
someone
yeah,
else will come out with
100%.
something new. You need to
Always
reinvent
beat you.
yourself there
Yep,
and then
yep,
play the hey, I got a
yep,
better rate for you in
yep,
that stadium.
yeah,
So, really understanding the problem that your target audience is present to,
mm,
having your unique offering speak to that, and then looking to build a community.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
I love how you point out the new conference attender just trying to pitch. You brought back so many different memories, even just conferences in the past few weeks I've been to, and
yeah,
people
yeah,
come up to me, and they're at different chapters, but it's good recommendations for them of look to build relationships, look to be
yeah,
part of the community,
yeah,
look to create your own community,
yeah,
have your own site event
yeah,
as part of the conference beforehand. Everyone's in town. Be able
yeah,
to point at your super fans. Be
yeah,
able to really showcase everyone
yeah,
that believes in you, because then you're having that one-to-one
yeah.
conversation that you were talking about with the LinkedIn groups,
That's
present to
right.
everybody.
That's
So
right.
you're putting together this go-to-market strategy. You're setting it up to get to the goal. Um, what obstacles do you see that marketers run into,
Mm,
whether it is on the design side,
mhm,
really igniting enough marketing demand? Perhaps it's around staffing, or
yeah,
bringing in effective marketers. Could be
yeah,
around a low head count in general, more of the
yeah,
three-person marketing team versus working with a Fortune 500 that has hundreds,
yeah,
thousands of people working on the same initiative.
yeah.
Uh,
Sure, sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think many of us can relate to this. We are in the era of doing more with less. So,
More with
uh,
less.
yeah, more with less. And um, I have a really pretty clear perspective on this. Is that I actually believe that smaller teams are more effective. Um,
Hmm.
now, I'm not suggesting that there aren't certain phases of a company's growth. And again, I'll speak to marketing, to building a marketing function, building a marketing team in particular. So there are certain phases, if you are in, this is extreme, but practical, if you've raised your Series D and you're on the march to an IPO, well, guess what? There is going to be a tremendous amount of IR, meaning investor relations work that needs to be done. There's going to be a lot more events work. There's going to be, comms and PR. All of a sudden, like, yes, you definitely need more hands, on deck. But let's rewind, and let's talk about more of your growth stage, your scaling companies. So, Series A, Series B. Um, I think 5 to 7 people is more than enough, and I actually emphasize more. I think 3 to 5, you can crush it. I really do. Now, that there's constraints, right? So there's going to be some constraints. So some of the vanity marketing initiatives, so no, you're not going to have someone that just is, creating swag and you give them a couple $300,000 every year to just go make new cooler t-shirts and whatever. All right. But I would argue that that was absolutely a waste then, and it's even more of a waste today. So I'm poking fun at, but I think we all, those of us who've been in marketing for a while can recall, like, yeah, I remember the days when we used to make a new backpack every day, every year, and we'd go get 500 of these things made, and it cost us a very significant amount of money, and those days are gone, right? But the way that you do this, though, it's not, it's interesting because with generative AI tools, and I've leaned really, really heavily, by the way, into them, it changes the nature of what your marketing team is comprised of. So it used to be that you would basically have a team of T-shaped skill sets, and what I mean by that is that you had, someone who went really deep in PR and comms, right? And maybe, they could produce content and they knew, they were definitely conversant about digital, and, they knew something about running ads and, whatever. But I mean, they were T-shaped on like PR and outreach. And then you'd have somebody who was on the digital side, and maybe you'd even further have someone who really knew Facebook ads, and someone else who really knew LinkedIn, and and so on and so forth. You'd go across. I still believe that you need T-shape, but you need T-shape a little bit broader. So you need someone who's a writer, and I mean an expert writer. I don't mean somebody who can write. I argue that if there's anybody on the marketing team who can't write, I would question, like, everybody should be able to write, but you need someone who's an expert writer. You need someone who knows digital. Okay. Now, they should be most conversant in the platforms that are relevant to you. So a lot of my clients are in the companies that I work with, the companies I build, are B2B, usually deep technology, and the jury's out on whether TikTok is relevant. I know there's, every once in a while someone will pop up and go, "Oh, we're really driving a lot of leads on TikTok." Usually my eyebrows kind of raise. I'm like, okay, I wonder if we really dig into it, if that's really happening. But hey, I'll believe you. Um, but the point is that you better have someone on your team who knows LinkedIn and is a master of LinkedIn. I mean, who is a master, who wakes up every day seeking to understand the latest change. And it seems like LinkedIn makes a change every day,
Sure does.
to the algorithms algorithm and the user interface, et cetera. But so you need a T-shaped digital marketer. You need a T-shaped graphic designer. You need someone who tells stories just like you need someone to tell stories with words. You need someone to tell stories with pictures, with graphics. And by the way, that's what a designer and a marketing team should be doing. If the designer is not telling stories with pictures, if they're just producing pretty pictures, well, you can outsource that to Fiverr and anyone, Upwork and anywhere. And it's it, you don't need to pay a high salary for a designer on staff, but you need that. Now then the question is, okay, Mark, but now if you only have so I said you need a writer, you need a digital marketer, you need a designer who can tell stories with pictures. You really should have a video person now on the marketing team. And I mean a video producer. I don't mean somebody again is like, yeah, I know how to use Premiere, like no, somebody who tells stories with video. And you probably need somebody who's like a analyst, somebody who's going to be living inside the data, pulling it out of Google Analytics, pulling it out of HubSpot. Okay, so now you've got, let's just call it 5 people roughly, right? And you need a conductor. So you need somebody who's gonna, like a CMO, right? So you need a conductor, but you need 5 people. Now you say, okay, but how do we produce content at scale? Well, this is the beautiful thing. If you have an expert content producer who's a writer, who knows how to craft the messages, who knows what messages to craft, well, you lean into generative AI and you can get the output. I'm seeing it and I'm doing it right now in multiple contexts where I have part-time writers who are working 20 hours a week and are producing 3 to 4x the content at double the quality of what highly paid, very expensive writers are producing in traditional marketing orgs. This is a fact because I've worked with the expensive writers, highly trained, very good at their craft, by the way. I'm not talking about people who call themselves writers, but they're not. I mean, real writers. But you take somebody and with the amplification of generative AI, they are able to produce at a scale that is really breathtaking, to be honest. And I'm talking technical content too. I'm not talking about, okay, well, it's all marketing, it's all kind of the fluffy business stuff that like you can just write me an article on category design, like okay. But by the way, if you give that prompt, what you're gonna get back isn't gonna be very good anyway. You have to be a master of it. You have to understand the tools. You have to understand what category design is, you
Yep.
know? So, so this is the new paradigm. The point here, Jason, and the takeaway for the listeners is that there are so many marketing teams that have ballooned to 10, 12, 15 people, and they are not producing a fraction of either the output or the quality of this 5-person team
Hmm.
using tools. And that's just the reality. And it's what I'm seeing. And if teams are
Agreed.
not aligning to this new way of working, to this new architecture, um, I think they're going to be struggling. They're going
Agreed.
to struggle.
And you end up playing the game of telephone. It's different. It's difficult to manage 12 to 15 people
Yeah,
to be able to get
yeah,
them all on the same
yeah,
wavelength. And
yeah,
as you're pointing out here, with generative AI, you could take an expert and have them producing expert level
yeah,
work at scale.
yeah, yeah,
AI
yeah.
alone is not a stamp of quality. I've
No,
seen content that was clearly produced by a tool and lacks the human
yeah,
element. It
yeah,
lacks any hard hitting facts. Sounds
yeah,
too grandiose, or whatever it may be. It just
yeah,
feels off. But with the right content producer, you can look to streamline a lot of this, and
yeah.
as you said, do more with less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mark, I feel like I could keep talking to you about these tactics all day. If we were at a
I'm sure
conference
we
over that
could.
glass of wine, I could see hours going by here.
Yeah.
I want to get to a few questions around recommendations.
Yeah.
Maybe we could package some actionable
Sure.
insights here for
Sure.
listeners that they could test
Sure.
out for their own model today.
Yeah.
Listen to the
That's right. I
podcast,
love it. I love it.
go into
Yeah.
their own steps. So
Yeah.
you've given a lot of great recommendations around events, AI, really understanding your audience. What are some tests that you would encourage listeners, viewers, to take into their own campaigns, whether they're the
Yeah.
founder, the marketer, the
Yeah.
VC, watching their portfolio and
Yeah.
have their next meeting around growth?
That's
What are
right.
some things they could test out towards their own model?
Yeah. So, look, I think you have to start with a really sober assessment of where you're really at. And I use the word sober because entrepreneurs, we're naturally, I think, optimistic people, or else we would never we would never set out on this journey.
Of course.
So in general, it's easy to kind of look at the activities and sort of say, yeah, well, and how many times have you heard, Jason, this kind of response, so how did that campaign do? Yeah, well, we didn't get very many signups, but it was great for brand exposure. How
i.e.,
many
it didn't,
times? It
translation
totally
didn't work.
failed. It
Yeah.
totally failed. It's like, okay, come on, all right, it just failed. Just say it. So the first thing is to get really, just sober, and guess what? It might be really, really, really sobering. It might say, what we have is just plain not working, period. Like we're not, in other words, yes, we have a beautiful looking website. Yes, our trade show booth, looks like $1 million. Maybe it almost costs $1 million. But why is our revenue flat or declining? Why is the sales team complaining quarter after quarter that they don't have leads? Why, in other words, it's not working. So that's where you have to start. And then what you do is, I'm a huge fan of first principles. I strongly suggest to founders to like um devoid the thinking, just clear your mind from going back to, well, what's a silver bullet? What playbook do I need to pick up? What marketing book do I need to read? But it's never a tactical, it's almost never a tactical issue. Like I said, so many times the actual marketing that's being done, the quality of the output is very high. It's not mapping to business results. So that's where first principles says, why is this beautiful trade show booth, just to, and I am not picking on trade show booths, by the way. So I don't want anybody to, to hear and say, oh, this guy, he doesn't get it. He doesn't believe in events. No, there's a place for events, but it's just an easy one. So why is this beautiful trade show booth not converting? Why are we not driving more leads? Why are we not furthering, the sales process? Oh, it's because guess what? The actual buyers aren't even attending the show anymore. The buyers that are there are dipping in for a day. They have 6 pre-planned meetings and they're flying out at 7 p.m. so they can be home with the kids. The
Right.
days of spending a week in Vegas are long gone. Nobody wants to do that. That's 2000, 2005, 2006,
Yeah.
to 2010, 2011, those days are way behind us. So that's first principles. So going back to first principles and then just really getting, some of this, it's actually not hard to figure out. It's like, well, wait a second. So buyers aren't coming to Vegas to hang out for 3 days and do the tour of every booth. How do we get to them? Oh, interesting. It turns out that we have clumps of buying communities in Los Angeles, in Seattle, in Chicago, in New York. Wow. What if we went in there and we did a dinner? But we don't do a dinner, it's a sales pitch. We just say, "Hey, look, We just want to get a group of like-minded executives together. Our CTO is going to come give a little talk. We've invited this industry luminaire to join us. We'd love to have you come, you know? It's April
Absolutely.
30th, at Ruth's Chris and, in Burbank or, wherever,
I
downtown Los Angeles, wherever, and
I would go
and
to that.
that's first principles thinking.
Yep.
And this
For sure.
is this is what so many companies need to be doing. And if they do that, again, it is sobering because the reality is it smacks all of us in the face where we go, wow, we're flushing in some cases millions of dollars in marketing effectively down the drain, but we feel good about what we're doing, but it's not actually driving the business. But when you sit down and you have this conversation, now you can realign.
So, Mark, speaking of that sobering conversation, what do you do if it's not working? What do you
Yeah.
do if the first principle, it's not producing what you
That's
need?
right. That's
How
right.
do you optimize from there? How do you go back to
Yeah.
the drawing board?
Yeah. So, look, there does have to be a fundamental discussion. I mentioned early on that, even though I'm positioned as a virtual CMO, I very often get involved with product. Product. Now, I'm not a product manager. I don't go in and then start, building the product. But you do have to get really practical about what is the problem that our solution can address. And is there a sufficient need? Is that need, significant enough? And if it's not, how can we adjust the product either to address maybe an adjacent need? Maybe there's a way, the word pivot is often used in startups. In some cases, this might be a hard pivot. It might be, hey, we thought we were building a data analytics product. Turns out that this actually is a platform that'd be super valuable to be used in, patient care in the hospital, you know? Like, I don't know, that may seem like super random and radical, but guess what? There's plenty of stories out there of pivots that, were even more extreme. And the first company nearly failed, and the second one was a wild success.
Mhm.
So so I think again, you do have to get back to the product. And this is hard mostly for founders because the founder's in love with that idea, right?
Yep.
And the founder again has the happy years, like, yeah, but we've got such amazing validation from look at these Fortune 100s. All the CTOs said they would buy it. Well, it's been 18 months and we don't have a single PO.
Not showing
Like,
up.
like, like what, like, yeah, what are we missing here? We're missing something.
Mhm.
So, I think that is a reality. And again, this is not me as a marketer, then saying, okay, it's product's fault because of course,
Yeah, finger point.
that can happen. Yeah. Like, oh, I can't sell, but the sales leader, I can't sell because the product stinks, or,
Yeah.
it's like, well, we're in the boat together here. So we need to solve this together. If the boat goes down, we're all drowning, so we can't point at the other, team, the other department, but
And I believe optimization is where marketing talent really comes out, being
yeah,
able to have those category design experts, being able to
yeah,
have the industry personalities on the team that really understand that target audience. They did
yeah.
spend the right time, they did build the right relationship, they found the right solutions. What has been most effective for you from that point towards scale? How have you
Mm,
gotten up to these $500 million revenue numbers? What
yeah,
has been instrumental towards ramp up for you?
yeah. So, scale is always about removing complexity and getting clarity,
Okay.
getting clear. Now I realize it's kind of like, okay, on one hand, well, that's sort of obvious. But yet how many of us are guilty of adding complexity, which it certainly doesn't help with clarity, you know?
Could be
Um,
there.
Yeah, I mean, so in other words, I'm pointing at myself. I'm looking at myself in the mirror, even when I say that. And believe me, every day, I have to even remind myself, and then taking action. That is really that's the hallmark. And it's constant problem solving. It's challenging everything, every assumption, and always coming back to first principles. So you notice that I haven't laid out some, here's Mark's, 18-step framework for B2B domination, right? Why? Because that 18-step framework that worked in company A, maybe 16 of those steps will absolutely work in company B, but two of them will actually cause the other 16 steps to be nearly ineffective.
Sure.
But
And
guess what? If
yeah.
I'm bringing that, and if my assumption always is, well, what worked in company A is going to work in company B because they're in the same industry or they're the same size company or they're, whatever, then ultimately, I may not completely fail, but I'm not going to execute at the highest level, you know.
And it gets too complex, it's going to lack that clarity. It's not plug and play templates.
Be nice if it
It goes
was, but
against what you're saying of hey, you want to be able to have something that's unique, have
yeah,
something that is authentic to this rollout. And I think that is what speaks to the success that you've had and are having with the current companies that you play these CMO roles into.
right.
And Mark, I have taken a full page of notes here, even working on similar types of campaigns. I imagine there's a lot of differences, but marketing campaigns, there's things I'm learning from this. I'm going to be sharing with my team at length here. Even want to bring it to our next whiteboard session. So
Awesome.
I want to appreciate, I want to let you know, I appreciate you coming on to the podcast and breaking it all down and going into depth here, taking a break from some of the initiatives you're already running. I think you've given us a blueprint, maybe more than 18 points, but at least some tips that we're able to implement into our own campaigns here. What are some final thoughts as we begin to wrap up the episode that you want to leave the audience with? And what would be the best way for them to learn more or even get in contact
Sure.
with you?
Sure. Yeah. I'll share, how to get in touch with me and then end with some thoughts.
Yeah.
My website is growthstage.marketing. So it's a dot marketing domain. Just growth stage, all one word, dot marketing. And if you look under resources, there's articles and a ton of stuff. Look under mini books and there's some things there. Everything's ungated. I'm a firm believer in ungated content. Most of the time, there's a place for it. But anyway, hopefully someone can find some. I give you some insights. I talk a lot about category design. I actually have a mini book on first principles in marketing. I talk about account-based marketing, which of course is kind of a hot trendy or it was last year anyway, kind of a trendy topic. But I have a point of view on that might be interesting. And then just general, kind of go to market stuff. What I would leave everybody with is this, assuming largely that I'm talking to marketers, or go to market professionals, is know your buyer, know how your buyer thinks. To know how your buyer thinks, you need to know something about the ecosystem they operate in. In other words, your product operates in. You need to know what problem they're looking to solve. And I have just found that amazingly, not all buyers are clear on what problem they're even trying to solve, you know? And so you can listen to their feedback and sometimes say, yeah, I know you think that's the problem you're solving, but it's actually something a little bit different. The
Mhm.
reason why you need to know the buyer, the reason why you want to understand the problem, the reason why you want to understand the ecosystem that you exist in, you meaning your company and your product and your solution, is that that's how you're going to be able to simplify. That's how you're going to be able to cut past the jargon. That's how you'll be able to be the one marketing team that's out there just talking in plain language. You know, many years ago, legal agreements, it became quite popular to use what literally is called in legal jargon plain language agreements. You know, stop using all the thus, thou, these, shall, just simply write, Mark and Jason on this day agree to, do these things. And if one of them doesn't do it, this will happen. And we both sign,
Simple.
like plain and simple. And you read it and it's super clear and nobody's confused. So I really, my advice and just my, this is kind of my go-to when someone says, "Oh, what's your insight?" That's my insight for marketers and marketing leaders, but even individual contributors. If you're an individual contributor and you're listening to this, you're going, "Yeah, I get it." But maybe not the rest of my team gets it. Maybe my leadership doesn't get it. But that shouldn't stop you from mastering. Get out there, go with sales, go on sales calls. If you can't go on a call, listen into calls, listen to gong calls. Learn what the customer is really saying and what they're really thinking, and your effectiveness, your efficacy in how you do marketing will improve exponentially. It really will.
And in this digital world, being able to have that connection, that understanding, that authentic read on what they want can make all the
Yeah,
difference.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Awesome, Mark. Well, I've really enjoyed the podcast, the discussion here. Thank you again for taking the time to hop
Mm,
on and educate our audiences and hold this
awesome.
conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. It was a real honor, and I enjoyed it as well. So thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Take care.